My name is Sarah Whitman, and today I walked into a room I spent 20 years preparing for. The last time I saw my father, he slammed a door in my face and told me I'd never make it on my own. Now I'm standing in full uniform at my brother's wedding, and he's sitting 10 feet away, pretending I'm not even here. The room is beautiful white roses, crystal chandeliers, the soft echo of a string quartet, but all I can hear is the pounding in my ears. People are laughing, drinking, and clinking glasses. But when I walked in, time froze for me. My father didn't stand. He didn't even blink. He just leaned toward me with a dry smile and said, "Pity got you that invitation. Nothing else." I didn't flinch, but inside, something cracked. I've heard worse in combat zones, from enemies and allies alike. But nothing cuts like words from the man who gave you your name and then tried to erase you from it. Everyone else says a celebration. I see a war zone disguised in linen and champagne. And yet, I came here knowing he'd be here. Not for him. For the silence between us that I was finally ready to break. 20 years is a long time to be a ghost at your own family's table. But today, for the first time, I'm not here to ask for a seat. I'm here to see who will rise when I do. I was 18, the night he told me I didn't belong to him anymore. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had my acceptance letter to West Point clenched in my hand like it could protect me. I stood in the living room, heart racing, voice shaking. "Dad," I said, trying to steady myself. "I got in. I'm going to West Point." He didn't even look at the letter. He just stared at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into his house by mistake. Then he said, "You won't last a month. That place isn't for girls playing soldier." He was a retired colonel. Discipline was his religion, the house his command post. My childhood was a parade of inspections, drills, and yes sirs at the dinner table. But I loved it. I loved the stories, the pride in his voice. When he talked about his service, I wanted that. I wanted to earn my own medals, not just polish his. When I told him my dream, I thought maybe he'd be proud, or at least surprised. But all he saw was rebellion. He walked across the room slowly, opened the front door, and pointed outside. "If you think you're a soldier," he said, calm as ice, "then start by surviving without me. Get out." My mom was frozen on the staircase, one hand gripping the banister like it was the only thing holding her together. Her lips parted, but no words came. She just stared, helpless. My little brother Ethan stood behind her. 14 years old, too young to understand, too old to forget. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, anything, but he didn't. I picked up my duffel bag from the floor. It had been packed for college, not exile. Still, I didn't cry. Not yet. As I stepped past the threshold, I caught the scent of his cigar still burning in the ashtray. That smell would stay with me for years. It meant home once. Now it just meant war. The door slammed shut behind me. No goodbye, no second thoughts. Just silence, and the soft sound of my own footsteps on the porch. I spent the first few nights on a friend's couch. The acceptance letter stayed folded in my jacket pocket, the edges worn from me holding it too tightly. Every time I felt like I was slipping, I'd take it out and read it again. I didn't hear from anyone in that house after I left. Not a call, not a note, nothing. The girl who used to polish her father's boots was gone. In her place stood someone he didn't recognize and didn't want to. And in that moment, I made a promise. I would survive. And I would make sure he heard my name again, just not in the way he expected. West Point didn't care that I showed up alone. No one asked why I didn't have parents helping me unpack. I blended in just fine until the introductions ended and the shouting began. Beast Barracks hit like a freight train. 6 weeks of being broken down and rebuilt, physically and mentally. I didn't have letters from home or a care package waiting in the mailroom. I had blisters, bruises, and silence. I had hunger so sharp it made my hands shake. I had a photograph of my mother and Ethan folded inside the only book I brought. The first time I fell behind on a run, someone muttered, "Should have stuck to cheerleading." That was day 2. By day 10, I was keeping pace. By week 3, I was leading the pack. Some cadets looked at me like I was a lost tourist in the wrong uniform. They called me Barbie, Princess, Mascot. One of them stuffed a pink pacifier in my locker. I didn't react. I just kept showing up. Push-ups in the rain. Ruck marches with 40 pounds on my back. Repeating every mistake until my palms bled. I didn't cry. I didn't quit. I learned to turn exhaustion into fuel. One night, after lights out, a letter slid under my door. It was from Ethan. His handwriting was shaky, like he didn't want to get caught writing it. It read, "Dad says you'll come back when you fail. I hope you don't." I read it until the words blurred. It wasn't much, but it was everything. A crack of light in a sealed room. Academics were brutal. Calculus was like a foreign language, and I'd never seen a course load like that before. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered that door slamming behind me. And I stayed. I cleaned rifles better than anyone in my platoon. I learned how to disassemble and reassemble in under 30 seconds. I memorized manuals like scripture. When the others went home for Thanksgiving, I stayed on campus. I volunteered for cleanup shifts, snow patrol, and kitchen duty. Anything to stay busy. Anything to avoid thinking about a house where I used to live. Instructors started noticing. One pulled me aside after a training exercise and said, "You don't complain. You don't talk. But you don't break. That counts." Respect came slowly, like water eroding stone. The same cadets who once mocked me began asking for help on drills. I didn't say yes to all of them, just the ones who earned it. I still got the stares, the backhanded compliments. "You're pretty tough for a girl." I smiled when they said that, because I was tough. Not for a girl, just tough. By the end of my second year, I was ranked in the top 10% of my class. I had calluses on every finger and knew how to fire a rifle blindfolded, but I still hadn't heard a word from my father. Every achievement felt a little empty without someone to call. But I wasn't doing it for applause anymore. I was doing it for the girl on that porch, the one who walked away when the easy thing was to stay and shrink. At the end of one grueling field training, I got heat stroke. My squad leader told me to tap out. I told him to wait 5 minutes and hand me the map. I finished the final exercise standing. No one clapped. There were no speeches, but someone left a Gatorade and a protein bar on my bunk that night. No note, just quiet respect. I started writing letters I never sent. To my dad, to Ethan, to myself. They filled a shoebox under my bed. My own history, in ink and sweat. Some nights, I still felt like an intruder in a world built by men who never wanted me there. But I kept waking up, tying my boots, and putting one foot in front of the other, because no one was coming to save me. And that was the point. I had to become the person I needed back then. By the time I crossed the stage at graduation, my name was called with honors. No one from my family came to see it, but I saluted anyway. Not for them, for me. My first deployment dropped us in eastern Afghanistan, 2 months into the summer heat. Dust stuck to your skin like glue, and everything smelled like oil and metal. I was assigned to a supply transport detail, which sounded safe on paper. We were moving crates of water, fuel, and ammunition between bases. 12 of us, 3 Humvees, 1 predictable route. I should have known better. The ambush came fast. 1 second, we were rolling through a narrow pass. Next, the lead vehicle exploded. The shockwave lifted dust and screams at the same time. My driver froze. I grabbed the wheel and yanked us off the road behind a rock outcrop. Gunfire cracked like dry wood. Someone shouted coordinates. Another screamed for cover. Corporal Ramirez was hit while trying to pull another soldier out of the burning truck. I saw him drop behind a smoking tire, clutching his leg. He was bleeding out fast. No one moved. The gunfire was too heavy, and no one wanted to be the second body down. But I was already crawling under the Humvee, counting breaths and seconds. I got to him, dragging only my med kit and a smoke canister. We were pinned between a wall and an open kill zone. I told him to stay awake. He joked about his socks not matching. I patched what I could, then popped the smoke and started pulling. Every inch felt like dragging 100-pound weight. My shoulder was screaming. My knees were raw, but I didn't stop. Bullets ripped through the smoke, but we didn't get hit. When we finally reached cover, my hands were covered in his blood. He looked up at me and said, "Thanks, Ironback." The name stuck. No one knows who said it first, but by the end of the week, even the command was calling me that. It meant something, that I'd earned my place, not just as a soldier, as their equal. Ramirez made it, lost some feeling in his leg, but kept the leg. When he got back to the States, he sent me a photo from the hospital. His newborn daughter was wrapped in pink. Her name was Sarah. I never replied to that message. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at it until my vision blurred. That night, I walked outside the tent, looked up at the stars, and let myself cry. Quietly. Alone. Because no matter how strong you are, some moments split you open. Combat changed how I moved, how I breathed, how I slept. I stopped waiting for the world to make sense. I just learned how to respond faster than it could hit me. Some days we lost people. Good people. Friends. I wrote their names in my notebook beside the letters I never sent home. I never told my father about any of it. Not about the firefights. Not about the medal I received. Not about the lives we saved or the ones we couldn't. Because it didn't matter if he ever knew. I knew. My team knew. And that was enough. That first mission didn't make me fearless. It just taught me fear wasn't something you ran from. It was something you carried. And if you carried it right, it made you stronger. That's when I stopped looking back and started leading from the front. When I pinned on my lieutenant bars, I stood in front of a mirror, held my breath, and smiled for a photo I had no one to send to. Still, I emailed it to the address my father never changed. I added a short message. Made it. There was no reply. Not then. Not after. Not even when I was promoted to captain 2 years later. I left voicemails on birthdays. I sent holiday cards. I even mailed one of my unit's challenge coins home with a note that said, "Just thought you might like to see what I've been up to." Silence. Back at the base, I was known. Respected. Sometimes feared. People listened when I spoke. Cadets quoted my training routines. Commanders requested me by name. But none of it reached the place I wanted it to go. Not once did my phone light up with Dad on the screen. Not once did I get a single word from home, beyond Ethan's occasional check-ins. He tried. He really did. He'd text when he could. Short things like, "Proud of you," or "Mom asks about you." But the distance between us had become more than miles. It was years of silence wrapped around a single slammed door. When I made Major, I didn't even try to call. I just stared at the certificate, wondering if anything would ever be enough. Then the call came from Ethan, but it wasn't about me. It was Mom, hospital, stage 4. They didn't tell me sooner because she didn't want to distract me. I flew home in a dress uniform. No one met me at the airport. No one said welcome back. The church was small, the flowers plain. She looked peaceful in the casket, like she'd finally stopped waiting for something. I stood by her side while the rest of the family filtered past me like I was part of the furniture. My father sat in the front row, hands folded, eyes dry. He didn't look at me once. I gave her eulogy. He didn't applaud. After the service, I found a quiet spot near a tree where the wind didn't interrupt my thoughts. I took out a letter I'd written her years ago but never sent. I read it out loud, just once, then folded it and placed it under a stone at her grave. A week later, an email showed up in my inbox. No subject line, no greeting, just, "The funeral was nice. I still don't understand your decision." That was all. No warmth, no regret, just confusion dressed as detachment. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to scream or laugh. Instead, I closed my laptop and went for a run until my legs gave out. There are successes no one celebrates. Ranks earned in silence. Battles won that never make headlines. I carried all of them with me like quiet medals, stacked under the armor no one could see. By then, I had stopped looking for applause, but part of me still wanted acknowledgement. Not pride, just presence. So I kept writing letters I never sent. Sometimes I burned them. Sometimes I buried them in old notebooks. Each one said the same thing in different words. I'm still here, because even when no one claps for you, even when no one watches, you keep going. Not for them, for you. The wedding was set in a glass hall overlooking the river. Everything shimmered white linens, gold chairs, soft music drifting from a baby grand. I arrived early, in full dress uniform, 4 stars shining against navy wool, heels clicking on polished marble. Heads turned when I walked in. Some stared, some smiled. Most weren't sure if they should salute. I scanned the room once and found him. My father, sitting beside Ethan, stiff and unreadable. He didn't move when he saw me, just raised an eyebrow, then leaned over and said, quiet enough for no one but me to hear, "Pity got you that invitation." Nothing else. This time, it didn't sting. I looked him in the eye, adjusted my lapel, and said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, but because I'd already won a war bigger than his approval. The ceremony began. Vows were exchanged, hands held, laughter and tears mixed under warm lighting. I stayed silent, clapping politely, smiling when it was expected. Then came the toasts. One by one, friends and family stood up to speak. I kept sipping my water, ready for it all to end, ready to disappear before he could take another shot at my worth. But instead, the bride stepped up to the mic. She looked nervous, but determined. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the stand. Then she said, "Before we end, there's someone here who deserves more than just a seat at this wedding. She deserves our thanks." She looked right at me. My stomach tightened. I grew up hearing stories about a woman who never gave up, even when her own family walked away. She protected strangers, led soldiers, and became someone her younger self would be proud of. Today, I get to call her my sister. She turned to the crowd. "Please rise to honor Major General Sarah Whitman." Chairs scraped, feet shuffled, and then applause. Not polite, clapping, a wave. A full room, thunderous, stand on your feet, kind of ovation. Everyone stood, except my father. I stood slowly, not out of pride, but to acknowledge their gesture. I didn't smile. I just nodded once, letting the moment soak in. Ethan clapped the hardest. His wife had tears in her eyes. Across the aisle, my father stared straight ahead, hands locked, jaw tight. He didn't rise. He didn't blink. But I didn't need him to. The room had already spoken, and for the first time I felt seen. Not as his daughter, not as the girl who walked out with a duffel bag in a dream, but as someone who made it, on her own. When the applause faded, the music picked up again. People's Saturday conversations resumed. But everything had shifted. Later, someone leaned over and whispered, "How did that feel?" I said, like breathing for the first time in 20 years. Because that moment wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about knowing, finally, that I didn't need him to prove I was right. The girl who left had come back as someone no one could ignore. And this time, I wasn't asking for permission to be proud. I already was. A week after the wedding, a small envelope arrived at my door. No return address. Just my name, written in block letters I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. Careful but stiff. The kind of writing that comes from someone who hasn't done it in years. It read, "I didn't stand because I didn't know how." But I know it meant something. There was nothing more. No signature. No apology. Just that. I read it once, then again, then folded it and placed it on the counter. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just stood there, for a long while, breathing in the stillness of the room. Part of me had imagined something more, or maybe less. A phone call. A final silence. I didn't expect that sentence. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the years or the echoes of slammed doors. But it opened something I hadn't realized was still locked. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt lighter. Because for the first time, he hadn't dismissed me. He hadn't tried to rewrite the moment. He'd simply admitted it mattered. Maybe that was as close as he could get to saying he was wrong. Or maybe it was just a glimpse of a man trying to reach back across a gap too wide to name. Either way, I didn't need more. I had already made peace with silence. This was just an echo that landed gently. Instead of shattering everything again, I folded the letter, tucked it into the back of my notebook, and let it be part of the story. Not the ending. Just one more page. Looking back, I used to think strength meant never needing anyone. That proving myself meant standing alone, pushing forward, and never asking for help. But the truth is, even the strongest people carry someone with them. For me, it was my little brother's note. Just a few words. But they reminded me I wasn't completely forgotten, that someone believed I could make it, even when I wasn't sure myself. I've come to learn that sometimes it's not the loud voices that shape us. It's the quiet ones. The ones who whisper, "Keep going," when everything in you wants to quit. We don't always get the apology. We don't always hear the words we've waited a lifetime for. But healing doesn't always come the way we expect. Sometimes it just comes from knowing we're still here, still standing. So I'll leave you with this. Who stood for you when no one else did? Think about it. Hold on to it. And if you feel ready, share your story in the comments, because someone out there needs to hear it.